Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my April 2021 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. Today I'm also drinking cider because it's spring and I needed it. This one is ginger root and it's made on an island close to my island and it's lovely, and here we go. In terms of readathons, in April I participated in Read Fat Positive and the Disability Readathon. We're going to start with my nerdy hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. Also there's time codes below in case you really don't want to know about my stats. In April I read 22 books for a total of 6,604 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 3,200 of those pages were actually about 88 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books is 13 YA books, 7 adult books, and 2 middle grade books. I read 17 novels, 3 graphic novels, and 2 anthologies. This month, the biggest chunk of what I read was fantasy and contemporary, followed by non-fiction, historical fiction, romance, poetry, and mystery thriller. If you adjust by page count, the historical fiction was long and the poetry was short. Most of these books were from the library, but I did read one I already owned, one from a friend, and one from a publisher. I read 9 audiobooks, 6 ebooks, 4 paperbacks, and 3 hardcovers. About half of these books were in my usual 300 to 399 pages range, and all of them were published between 2010 and now. The majority of these books were by female authors, with a few male authors, a couple of books by a non-binary author, and one with multiple authors. And the protagonists were either female, or it was mixed ensemble, or non-specific non-fiction. In terms of setting, this month was overwhelmingly America-centric. In terms of diversity, nearly a third of what I read was intersectional, and only 2 books didn't have any discernible diversity. In terms of star ratings, this month I had 4 3-star books, 8 4-star books, 3 4.5-star books, and 7 5-star books. I didn't check against previous months, but I'm pretty sure that's probably the best reading month I've had. Let's start with our lowest rated read and work our way up to the highest, shall we? My first 3-star read is the graphic novel Sheets. This is about a girl whose mother has recently passed away, and not only is the daughter struggling with that, she's also running the family business because her father is basically checked out and still going to high school and all of these things. On the flip side of that, there's also this ghost that comes into her realm, but ghosts wear sheets on them so you can see where they are because otherwise they're invisible. And these two characters meet each other and some shenanigans go down. I really liked some of the ideas in this, it just wasn't my favorite thing that I've ever read. Next I read Strong Female Protagonist Book 1. This is set in a world where some people have superpowers and it has something to do with these people who are born during a certain time, and some of them get together and be superheroes and some of them are super villains. Our protagonist is one that used to be a superhero and she has since retired. She's just trying to go to college. But obviously being an outed ex-superhero and having some powers comes with some interesting adventures that happen along the way. This one had some cool social commentary, and I believe a second book is either just coming out or coming out soon, and I would be interested in eventually picking it up, but it's not something that I'm reaching for right now. Next we have And the Ocean Was Our Sky by Patrick Ness. This is a reimagining of Moby Dick, but told from the perspective of the whale. If you've been here for a while, you might know that I don't really read classics, but I do enjoy retellings of classics, which is what drew me to read this one. It was also the book that I picked out for the Buzzword Readathon, which I think this month had to do something with elements or sky. I can't remember what the category was. Obviously, if I was more familiar with the classic, I might have gotten a little bit more out of this one. There were things about this that I understood because I feel like Moby Dick is one of those classics that's just kind of out in social commentary and people understand certain parts of it because we've heard about them, even if we haven't actually read the book. Additionally, there are beautiful illustrations in this book. I was reading an art copy, so they weren't final proofs. From what I've seen online, the final art is absolutely gorgeous. This one also turned perspectives kind of upside down on their head because the whale's point of view of the world is kind of upside down of what we would think. Finally, my last 3-star read for this month was Wench by Maxine Kaplan. This is about a girl who is a tavern wench. She's been working and living at this tavern for about the past 10 years. She basically runs the place, but her guardian is the official owner, and then he up and dies on her. When she gets back from burying him, it turns out that some Queen's men have taken over her tavern. They're taking all of her stuff as supplies and just moving on and shutting her tavern down. She doesn't want that to happen. She's been working her butt off at this tavern. It is hers by right, but basically they tell her, well, you're gonna have to take it up with the Queen and Council, and she's like, cool, can I travel with you because I need to talk to the Queen? queen. From here it does go into some different type of adventuring. There is magic in this world, and some of the magic has to do with resource extraction, so it's interesting to look at this fantasy world as a tale about climate change because you can definitely read that in it. There was kind of a turn in purpose about 2/3 of the way through this book that I didn't really care for just because I wanted to see her get her tavern back. She loves her tavern, it's what she's always wanted to do, and then it kind of turned away from that, so it wasn't my favorite thing ever, but it was an interesting read. This is the part where I'm going to put this down. I'm probably going to forget that I am drinking it until the end of the video. On to my 4-star reads, the first one being the Backstagers 2018 Halloween Intermission #1, which is weirdly titled because I don't think there were any other Halloween intermissions. This I picked up because I read something else in the Backstagers universe and I just wanted to get back into the comic format of it. I've actually read these tales before, I'm pretty sure in print, but Hoopla, one of the apps I have from my library, had it in a digital format, so it was just easy to flick through. This is, I think, 3 or 4 different tales of the Backstagers having adventures around Halloween and what those would look like. It's delightful, the art is great, but there's not much to say otherwise. Next we have Unbroken, 13 stories starring disabled teens, and this is exactly what it says on the tin. It is 13 different stories with 13 different disabled protagonists just living their lives. What I liked about this is it had a wide variety of diversity when it came to what kind of representation it had. Off the top of my head, I believe there was chronic pain, there was a blind character, there was at least one wheelchair user, and of course the stories were short, so they left me wanting more because short stories always do, but I think that's a good thing in terms of a short story. I also picked up One to Watch by Stayman-London. This is about a plus-size fashion vlogger who is one day live tweeting a show that's kind of like The Bachelorette. I think it's called Main Squeeze in this universe, and she's talking about how there's never any diversity on these shows, both ethnic as well as sexuality. It's very heteronormative, as well as body size, and one of her followers, as she's drunk live tweeting the show, says, "Hey, are you going to write a blog post about this?" And she's like, "Sure I am," and she does that while she's drunk. She posts it, she goes to sleep, and when she gets up in the morning, it's gone viral. Fast forward, and the new producer of that show wants her to be the Bachelorette character on the next season. I ended up really enjoying this one, especially getting to know B so well before she actually got to the show and seeing what goes into making a reality show and whether or not she can trust these people or if they're just playing a part on the reality show. It does take incredible vulnerability not to date, but then to date in public and then to date in a body that many people online troll. Next, for the Read Harder challenge of reading a food memoir, I read Yes Chef by Samuelsson. This is a fellow that I've seen on random episodes of random shows on the Food Network, but I didn't really know anything about him. Going in to figure out what food memoir to pick up, I just kind of started seeing which ones were available at my library. This is the first one from whatever list I was working on that was available, which is why I chose it. Marcus has lived a really complex and interesting life. He was born in Ethiopia but grew up in Sweden because his mother died when he was very, very young and he was adopted by a couple in Sweden. And then he went to culinary schools in different places in Europe, ended up traveling the world on a cruise ship, again cooking. He now lives in New York where he's made an absolute name for himself. He has restaurants all over the world. And it was just really fun to go into this and see what kind of passion he had for just what started out as a hobby of cooking with his Swedish grandmother. If you watch my weekly wrap-ups, you probably know that I watch a decent amount of food-related programming, especially when I'm just eating some food myself and want to put on something I don't really have to pay that much attention to. And this book has made me want to watch a bunch of Top Chef because apparently he was a contestant on Top Chef Masters, and now I just want to watch that season. The romance book I read this month was 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake. This is about a girl who's plus size, and you might guess from the Rake aspect of the title that it's historical fiction, and she has basically been put on the shelf because she's not the body type that men want. She's very plain, and she's also looked down upon herself as well, so she doesn't have the greatest confidence. One day she makes this list of things that she would love to be able to do if women were allowed to do these things, and at the top of the list is to kiss somebody passionately, and after a couple of beverages, she ends up at this guy's house who she's always had a crush on, and is she going to kiss him? Probably, because it's a romance, but it goes from there. What I really liked about this is all of the things on the list end up getting crossed off, although in ridiculous ways at some points. And this has an excellent B-plot where he finds out he has a half-sister who's from Italy, and he invites her into his home and then puts her out into society, and it's just full of rich people doing rich people gala things, which is always kind of fun to watch because of the opulence of it, but also all of these emotions and fun things like that. Sorry if I move, but my camera likes to just turn off in the middle of when I'm talking, which is just incredibly rude. Next, I read an arc of Cool for the Summer by Dahlia Adler. This follows a girl who spent the summer away because her mom had to go away for business reasons and she had to go with her because it's a single parent household type of thing. And she met this girl there and they spent the summer every day together and kind of got into a bit of a relationship, but they haven't really talked since she got home. On the first day of school, the guy that she's been crushing on for like 6 years finally shows her some attention, and then, of course, the girl from the summer shows up. She has no idea if they're together, she has no idea what's going on, she has no idea why the girl didn't tell her that she was coming to her high school, and now she's caught in the middle of this love triangle. I don't pay enough attention to music to know that Cool for the Summer is the name of a song, I think by Demi Lovato. I don't pay attention to music. However, that is addressed in this book because it is named after that song, so for fans of that, you get that aspect of it. What I really appreciated about this book is up until the point of meeting this girl during the summer, this character thought she was straight, and then when she's trying to figure out what is going on with her own emotions, she goes to a couple people she knows is bi or pan and asks them about their experiences, and unfortunately they are the type of people that always knew that they were queer. I was one of those people who didn't know I was queer until I was 30 years old, and in part it's because if you don't already know, you can't possibly be, and that mentality, which is just so toxic, it takes some of us some time to figure it out. In the society we're sold so many untruths about bisexuality, like it has to be a 50-50 thing and you can't like any other gender than boys and girls, which is also wrong. So I really appreciated seeing this character who had this discovery about herself because I haven't seen a lot of that, and maybe if I saw something like this when I was younger, I might have clued in a little bit faster. Can't guarantee that because I'm also demi and that played into it, but there you have it. I also read Lost in the Neverwoods by Aiden Thomas, which I was very excited about because Cemetery Boys was my favorite book of last year, and this is a reimagining of Peter Pan. I'm using reimagining very specifically here because this is not a retelling of Peter Pan. What has happened is that in this world, about 5 years previously, Wendy and her 2 brothers went missing, and then 6 months later she showed back up. She has no idea what happened, but her brothers are still missing. When they were younger, her mother used to tell her all these stories about this character named Peter Pan, and she's been telling her brother those stories, and now the people that she works with at the hospital, she's telling all the kids there those stories. And on her 18th birthday, a guy shows up claiming that he is Peter Pan. He seems pretty shocked that she doesn't know who he is, and with his help, she's hoping to figure out what happened to her brother, as well as figure out why children around her town keep going missing. I very much enjoyed this book. I actually had the pleasure of seeing Aiden Thomas speaking on a panel before either of his books were published. And he was talking about how this is actually the first book he wrote and sold, and then it was decided for him that Cemetery Boys should be his debut, which I thought was a very strong choice, actually. Additionally, this book made me cry, so you know it has a roller coaster of emotions. If it made me feel things, it's gotta be good. The final book on my 4-star list for this month is Sitting Pretty. Rebekah is an English teacher, she's a student of disability studies, and she is a wheelchair user. Years ago, she started an Instagram of the same name for her point of view on life, and this is an expansion of that project. The audiobook is also narrated by the author, which I always love, and that actually happened 3 times this month, which I was not expecting because the other 2 are fiction. This has been on my holds list from the library for ages, so I was just really excited it happened to come in during the Disability Readathon. I highly suggest reading this one. It was excellent. On to my 4.5-star reads, the first one being Intergalactic Travels. This was my one poetry for the month. And I believe this one was recommended to me by Alex over at Pucks and Paperbacks, so thank you for that recommendation. I always try to remember to recognize people that have recommended things and I've ended up reading them, but I don't always do that, and I'm very, very sorry about that. This collection is largely about this author's experience growing up in the United States as an undocumented immigrant who is also Indigenous and Black, and genderqueer, I believe, is how they identify. These poems played with form, as well as using mixed media, as well as played with language. Sometimes the poems would be in English, sometimes they would be in Spanish, and sometimes they would be in an Indigenous language that I didn't take note of at the time. I'm sorry for that. As we know, my thoughts about poetry never run too deep, but I did really enjoy this. Next we have The Backstagers and the Theater of the Ancients. This is the second in the middle grade book series that is a spin-off of the graphic novel series. This book actually has 2 plots to it, an A plot and a B plot, and the last time I talked about it, I only talked about the B plot, so I want to make sure to definitely talk about the A plot in this wrap-up. The Backstagers are a group of boys at this all-boys school in this drama department. They work the backstage of these theatrical productions. And that's sometimes a little bit more challenging than it sounds because there are fantastical elements to their realm. If you go into certain areas of the backstage, you will get lost. You could go to portals to different theaters around the world. It's a whole thing. It's delightful. The plot that I focused on last time had to do with Jory and him getting kind of addicted to social media through no fault of his own. He was actually tricked into it because these people from the other side of the world wanted to steal something for him, so that's kind of how they tricked him into doing it. The other plot has to do with the musical that they're actually putting on at this point, which is called Tammy. Now, something funny about this world is all the musicals that they put on are musicals that are based on musicals from our own world. For example, they previously put on Les Terrables, which is a take on Les Miserables. They put on Lise, which is a take on Rent. This time they're putting on Tammy, which is a take on Tommy. Now, Tommy is a musical I didn't actually understood was a thing. If you know the song Pinball Wizard, it's actually from this rock musical. And Tammy is all about this deaf character and how they live in the world, and this character is usually played by somebody who can really belt out the rock anthems. However, in this interpretation, they actually want to cast a deaf actress and have another actress singing her parts backstage while the deaf actress is on stage and going through these different aspects of life. I really love this aspect of the plot and talking about inclusion in theater spaces because they are not always inclusive. Very often in theater spaces, there are the people that want to keep things traditional, and that's not always the best way to do things. My library currently has the 3rd book on order, and I'm very excited for them to get it so I can get it and read it because I love this series. My last 4.5 star read was Get a Grip, Vivy Cohen. This is an epistolary middle grade novel about this girl who is autistic and loves baseball and starts writing letters to her favorite baseball player, and eventually he actually starts writing back. In these letters, she talks a lot about knuckleball, which is the type of throw that this baseball player actually taught her how to do about 3 years ago when they very briefly met. And as time goes on, she ends up actually having the opportunity to join a team, but her mother is very, very overprotective, so whether or not she's going to be on the team long term remains to be seen. In addition, there's somebody on the team who is an absolute dick, and I just hate this kid. He's one of those kids that's like, you're different, I'm gonna make fun of you, and it's just terrible, and I hate it when kids are like that. And to make it worse, he's the kid of the coach, so obviously the coach doesn't know about it because he is a gem of a human being, but this kid is just the worst, so there's a lot going back and forth. I really enjoyed this one. It was excellent. Again, I think Alex recommended this one as well, so apparently I'm just the month of reading things Alex has recommended because it's so good. Alright, let's get on to my 5-star reads. I'm sure my battery is going to die at some point soon, but let's see how much we can do before then. First, we have The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. This is a historical fiction about this woman who has this condition. I can't remember the name of her right now, and I actually had to look this up because I'd never heard of this condition before, but in the mountains of Kentucky, there was actually a condition for a lot of people in those hills where their skin was a blue color, and they actually faced a lot of prejudice about this. In this book, she is the last of her kind. Her father is still living, he also has blue skin and he works the mines, but she is the last living person with this condition that they know of because they don't travel outside their own community. She's what's called a bookwoman, which is a project that was set up during the New Deal in the 1930s where the government would pay the salaries of these librarians and they would get donated materials and take them to different places around the hills of Kentucky, and I imagine elsewhere as well. I didn't actually look into that, but that's where this is set. This is actually a very brutal story. She faces a lot of persecution because of the color of her skin, which also plays into her relationships with other people in the book because the majority of the people that she interacts with are white. She is also white, she just has skin that is tinged blue because of this medical condition, which is addressed later in the book. It's actually figured out what this is and why it happened. But because of the hue of her skin, she is treated the same way as African American people in this society. This book is brutal. Trigger warnings for rape, attempted rape, murder. There are many terrible things that happen in this, but it was an incredibly well-written and well-researched book. If you're looking for some historical fiction, especially about something that I had certainly never heard of before, this is definitely one to pick up. My camera battery died. Onward! Next we have Black Girl Unlimited by Echo Brown. This is a semi-autobiographical contemporary fantasy book. The protagonist of this book is a mostly teenage Echo Brown growing up in a very poor family, and she finds out that she is a quantum wizard. This means that she has the ability to perform minor miracles, but she doesn't know that much about how it works because her mother refuses to be a part of it. The most captivating thing about this book is every chapter seemed to have two different points of the story that were happening simultaneously, and it would intricately weave between the two. This is one of the books that I listened to that was narrated by the author, and she did an amazing job. I would only realize that we were going from one scene to another because there would be a slight break in the sentence, but that's exactly how it would be written on the page. I imagine you'd be halfway through a sentence, I assume there'd be an M dash, and then you would be in the other portion of the story that was being told. This had to do with hardships she faced growing up, what her parents were going through, what she wanted to do to make sure that her family survived the racism that they faced, the fact that people looked down upon them not only for their race but because of their social economic class. This was just so full of love and hope and grief and terrible things that happened to her. So again, trigger warnings for assault as well as sexual assault in this one, both on and off the page. Additionally, I wanted to remember that Echo Brown is currently going through some health issues, so there's a GoFundMe for her. I will link that down below. I threw in what I could. If you have a couple of extra dollars, throwing that in would be a good idea. Again, it's linked down below. I am almost done my cider and there are 5 to go. I'm just gonna finish it so I don't forget about it, because warm cider is not my favorite cider. Next we have Even If We Break. This is a story about 5 people that go off into the middle of the woods to play basically a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. This is something they've been doing together for 3 years, and it's the last time they're all going to get together to do it because some of them are graduating. Their friendships have also kind of crumbled around the edges recently, so this is the last time they're all going to get together. This is narrated from the 5 different points of view of these 5 different people, and the audiobook was also narrated by 5 different people, which was just fantastic. If you've ever wanted a trapped in the woods but then creepy things start happening and then maybe somebody dies type of situation, this is the book to pick up if you want representation in sexual identity, gender identity, as well as disability. Off the top of my head, at least a couple of these characters are queer. One of them is non-binary and one is a trans man, as well as a couple of these characters are disabled. One of them is autistic and one of them uses mobility aids. All of these different intersections of identity come into play in this situation, and I just very much enjoyed it. Because it does have this thriller aspect of it, I don't really want to tell you too much about the plot because I don't want to give anything away, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first person I saw talk about this is Anna Goldberg, which would make sense because they also write roleplay books as a living and enjoy roleplay and co-host the Disability Readathon, so it would make a lot of sense. I'm pretty sure that's who recommended it to me, and it is just a really good time. Next we have A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow. This was a complete surprise for me that I loved it as much as I did, not because I went into it expecting not to love it, but I expected to enjoy it, not absolutely lose my mind for it. This book is about a Cuban American girl from Florida who has gone through what she calls the trifecta. Recently her grandmother, who she was very close to, died. Her boyfriend of years broke up with her just before prom, and her best friend just left the country pretty much without telling her that that's what she was doing, instead of the plans they had to live together after graduation. She does something that completely freaks her family out, so they end up sending her to this very small town in England where she has an aunt who owns a bed and breakfast, and she's going to spend the summer there just to get a different perspective, just to have some space to grieve. She's really mad about this. She just wants to be able to grieve the way that she wants to grieve. She wants to be able to continue to work at her family bakery because that is her passion in life, and now she's removed from it and she's mad about it. I originally was a little bit upset about this because I would give anything right now to travel, especially on somebody else's dime, but I came to more understand her side of the story. While she's in England, she makes these friends, she worms her way into the kitchen of the bed and breakfast. It is a very wonderful summer. I wish I could spend a summer this way. I also really enjoyed the slow burn of the romance and what it means to want to get entangled in a romance with somebody, but knowing that you're leaving in a matter of weeks makes that really difficult. This made me want to eat all the things, it made me want to drink all the tea, it really made me want to travel, and I just really thoroughly enjoyed it. Next we have Last Night at the Telegraph Club. This is another historical fiction that takes place in San Francisco. I believe this was the 1950s, but I read this near the beginning of the month, so I might have the decade wrong. This takes place primarily in Chinatown because our protagonist is Chinese American and it has a lot to do with her family. There's also some flashbacks in this to kind of when her parents were about her age and what it was like back then. The real crux of this story is this protagonist sees an advertisement in a newspaper for this club that is going to be hosting this woman who is a male impersonator, and she is incredibly drawn to this concept. There's something about this woman that she is just head over heels about, but she has this intrinsic knowledge that she shouldn't be as into it as she is. Even though it's her senior year and they've actually been in school together, she makes this new friend at school who offers to take her to the club to see this act, and it goes from there. This is another one of those books that is heavily researched, and you can tell in the prose, not because it's info dumpy, but because it's such a rich world. This is kind of the era of the communist scare, which I believe was the Red Scare, which turned into the Lavender Scare. Anyone who was thought to be a communist was suddenly also thought to be queer, and delving into that history was incredibly interesting, but then you got this extra lens of what the Chinese American experience of that was. Again, 5 out of 5 stars, would recommend. My penultimate book on this list is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. Last month I read Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, absolutely loved it, decided I basically need to read everything she's ever written, and I am going to do that. This book is about Claudia. She comes back from a summer of staying with her grandmother, and she expects to see her best friend Monday, but she just doesn't. She calls her and their phone has been disconnected. She doesn't show up to school on the first day. She doesn't show up to school the first week, the first month. And this whole time she's asking, where is Monday? And nobody is helping her figure out what happened to her best friend. This is another book that is full of trigger warnings, so looking up a full list beforehand is a really good idea. One that people often forget is the discussion of miscarriages. That's definitely a trigger in this. There isn't a miscarriage, I believe, on the page if I'm remembering correctly, but they do discuss previous miscarriages. So there's that. There's also discussions of child abuse, which is also very prevalent in this book. This protagonist also has a disability that she has been hiding from basically everyone except for her best friend Monday, so that obviously plays into this book as well, and I really love to see that inclusion. I feel like I'm going to say this about every book by this author, but this was excellent, and if it is something that you can handle to read, you definitely should. My favorite book of this month is something that I've been meaning to read for ages, and I finally got around to it, and that's The House on the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This is one of those books where I feel like if you're watching this video and you watch BookTube, you probably know what this book is about because I've seen so many people just gush over it before, and I tried to kind of distance myself from that because I like to go into my books not knowing very much initially and just growing to know and understand the book on my own terms. What I knew about it going into it is it has to do with this guy that runs an orphanage for magical children, I assumed somewhere in the Cerulean Sea. That is accurate, but our protagonist is actually this man who works for this company that goes to these different orphanages and makes sure that they are running correctly, and based on his recommendations they can continue or be shut down. He is really diligent in his work, but he lives a very, very lonely life, and he kind of keeps his head down at work, just gets his work done. And then one day he's given this top secret case where he's going to this orphanage he didn't even know existed, and it goes from there. Firstly, for those who have read it, I want to visit this orphanage and hang out with all of these kids because they are just such intriguing, interesting, complex characters. I also love that the protagonist of this book is an older queer man and he just wants to do good in the world, and I just really enjoyed it. I also loved his cat. I can't remember his cat's name. I think it's Capernia. She was just a fun side character. There's a small place in my heart for lonely characters that have a pet that appears on the page. That's just a whole thing. The hype of this book is real. If you haven't read it, I highly suggest doing so. This gave me Welcome to Night Vale vibes, but like a YA version that is way more heavy on the whimsy, and I loved it. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the weekly entertainment playlist is always linked down below. If you've read or are intending to read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that is down below, as well as the link to my PayPal and my Amazon wishlist in case you would like to buy me a book. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!